Hi everybody. So in preparation of taking the car to paint, we've gone ahead and removed the Euro bumpers back off. We've removed the headlights, removed the grills, removed a bunch of stuff off the car, all of the rain gutter trim, all the belt line trim, or knee trim, whatever you want to call it. This has all been taken off the doors. I didn't go into really good detail as far as taking all off because, I don't know, just for time's sake, I kind of ran out of time. So, but before we can take it to paint, I also need to remove the sunroof. And so what I want to do is I want to record the first step of that because that's part of redoing your headliner. And in redoing the headliner, it's very important to do it right. And so we're going to begin by showing you how to do that. Pretty much got it stripped out.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex. I'm going to be showing you guys how to take the sunroof portion apart on this headliner. So what you want to do is you want to roll the sunroof back about halfway. It's going to be the same procedure if you have a power sunroof or a manual one. So we'll go ahead on the inside. Crank the sunroof about halfway, basically until it passes this lip here. That way you can get access on the inner panel to pull down, and there's going to be a series of clips that are kind of spaced out with like 3 or 4 inches along this, and it's just on the inside. You just want to pop it down just like that. Okay, there's one more here. There we go. So now it separates from the actual sunroof. And then we can roll the sunroof back and hold this portion down. That way it pops off of the railing here. Roll it all the way in. And then you want the sunroof to actually pop in the back up. That way you can access the 3 bolts on each side. Alright, so once the rear of the sunroof is tilted up, there's going to be 3 Torx on each side. It's a T20. So we're going to want to go ahead and loosen 3 on this side and the same thing on the other. Sometimes these seize in, so you have to go slow not to break them.
Basically have to work it left to right slowly until you can get them loose because they've been in there for so long. It could be rust in place, it could be just gummed up or dirt. And there's 3 of those, so you've got one here, and one more at the front. So times that for both sides, you got 6 total. And they, if I can get this to focus, they just look like this. You can see there's a little bit of rusting on this one, so when you go to reinstall it, it's advised that you clean these up.
Just get in some kind of Ziploc bag so you can keep all your hardware. And then once they're unscrewed on this side and on that side, the sunroof basically just comes out. And this is also a good time to replace the sunroof gaskets. There are 2 pieces, like this one's sagging. It's another reason why water was getting in and soaking the headliner, giving it a discoloration. All right, so that basically pops out just like that. So once the sunroof portion is out, we're gonna head and lower the plastic brackets that hold the sunroof in. And we're gonna rotate it back until this front wind fairing is gonna come up. Keep going right about there. And then we can start unscrewing the tracks that hold the headliner in all the way around, and they're just held on with Phillips. So we'll go ahead and pop off this section here. Just snaps straight into it.
This lever here, it just snaps up. Yeah.
Get a little pry bar underneath or a screwdriver. Okay, before we can take off this wind fairing off, we're going to take off the sections on the side, the front portions. If you if you're doing this in person, you would see there's like a couple different sections how these are stacked, and basically you kind of have to do it in this particular order. So we're gonna take off this front piece here first. So it just looks like this. And these are specific to each side. So sometimes I can just put a little Sharpie mark or something on one end. That way you know which way they go. And then it might be also a good idea to take some photos before you start taking things apart. Okay. So this is the portion you want to take off, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Same deal on this end. And the Phillips screws are all the same except on these two. So these two are specific to this bracket here. Front. And this wind fairing also holds the front portion of this, the visor bezel, and all that fabric goes in underneath here.
Yeah, too often we get people that are attempting to remove this front cover right here where all the sun visors go. And they think that once they remove the sun visors, they can just yank this down. The problem is they end up breaking everything that it holds onto, and then you end up with a really bad sunroof panel. When you remove the wind deflector, what happens a lot of times is there's a lot of dirt built up in here. And a lot of you don't know that there's drainage here. And you can see it's completely clogged. So you've got water that's supposed to go through here, and it's most likely is not. And it's the same thing on this end. Look at all that debris. So this is a really good time to do some housekeeping by cleaning all this garbage out. And then also you can spray some lubricant down here just to get it all, you know, start to disintegrate whatever's in there, and then get some pressurized air and blow these out. But otherwise you'll start getting rust through here, and obviously if water accumulates, there's only so much that the old paint can take before it starts rusting away.
Once that front wind fairing visor is off, there's two Phillips, two long ones, one here, and then one also on this side. This goes through the car and into the front sun visor panel portion. Go ahead and unscrew those.
And that's the, yeah, that's this panel here.
So it look like that. Then we can get these visors off. That portion to the side. These are held in by Phillips screws. Okay. No clips or anything, they just screw in. Sometimes these guys just have to get a little wiggle, since that front portion does go through the headliner into that hole there.
Yeah, it's the same process on the driver's one. Tilt it back, pull this out, unscrew those two right there, and Same thing here. Those two there, and this will be
I
out.
also want to remove the check panel because the wiring harness goes through the A-pillar and over, and it plugs in the back. So you get some plastic pry tools, less chance of marring it up. Plug in the back.
It's my favorite tool, the plastic pick.
There it goes. All right.
And there's the wiring. You want to just disconnect the connector from the OBC or from the check panel, and that's it.
There we go. And then, I mean, this would be a good time if you want to change to the Euro one or a 318 one that doesn't have a button. Final step is to disassemble the crank unit here. There's going to be Phillips holding the plastic unit. And that's just like a beauty cover on this guy. And then there is Phillips here. And one behind it. You want to twist it a little bit to get this one. And that just holds this cover. And we actually want to leave the actual sunroof turning mechanism on so we can move the sunroof back and forth.
Now, if you have an electric sunroof, it's just going to be a button. So all you're going to do is just remove that button. You can also use the plastic picks to do that.
So now this is basically just sitting in here. The only thing that's holding it is the door seal, and you can just kind of grab it on both hands, kind of wiggle it, and it'll get released off of there. And the fabric is just kind of wrapped around. Sometimes it could be glued in a little bit, so just work it gently and it starts to come free. So
this is on the driver's side. We're gonna pull down the seal. It's been there for a while, so it's gonna be a little in there. And then you can see the fabric. It's wrapped around right here. So you're gonna just peel that back. Like as Alex said, sometimes it's glued. You can see a little bit of glue was there, but you're going to separate it from the headliner itself, but that's it for that.
So then the top portion, it's wedged underneath this bracket here. So you kind of want to pry it up a little bit. That's all you need. You don't want to bend this portion because it is very fragile. And then this whole front portion is glued in. So you can just start it on one portion here.
Yeah, you want to
peel it back.
Use a pick or something.
Yeah.
And that allows you to remove that entire panel. Yep. And you can see where those screws went into. A lot of times people yank and they'll rip this whole piece off. And that's really what holds it in place. So you want to have that rigidity. Now over time also, something to note is you can see how the sun has started to peel the vinyl. So this is a good time to get this rewrapped either by yourself or somebody that's crafty, someone that's done upholstery. But in reality, it's not all that difficult. You don't have to use this kind of material. You could use vinyl, you could use fabric, you know, really anything, or leather, or you could use Alcantara, whatever you fancy. I mean, you can use a checkerboard. Really, at the end of the day, it's just whatever's going to be glued down to this substrate. So you would remove this fabric off, separate the two, clean the glue, and then re-glue new material on.
Next, we want to pull these tracks individually on this side first and then on that side. And the reason we want to do that is because the back portion is holding the center portion of this headliner unit. So once this gets past this wedge here, we can kind of just tilt it and then let it hang on the inside of the car. You never want to pull it out from the inside of the wind here because they're lined correctly, and then you'll have a lot of difficulty trying to center in the sunroof into the tracks.
Yeah, so in other words, if you pull it out from here, what will happen is you won't get it perfectly centered, and then the sunroof, when you go to reinstall it, will be crooked and it won't be centered out correctly.
And now there's this back portion that slides on each side.
On these tracks here.
So once it's past that black portion, you can see how it has like a hook where it kind of just slides right back on there. So that's the kind of orientation where it's gonna be. See, just like that. So we'll go ahead and remove this.
You can also see how much debris and tree branches and whatever else accumulated here over time. It doesn't look like anyone's used that sunroof for a while, or maybe it's been parked underneath the tree. But regardless, the sunroof material that is provided would come with this fabric material as well. So it's just a simple process of peeling everything off, and then you're gonna glue the new fabric on top of this case, this hard metal case or frame. With the exception of these pieces here, this would have to be riveted on. Everything else is just glued in place, and that's how it's been holding on here for 30 years.
All right. There's also like a metal strip in the back that holds the rear portion of the headliner here. They're all held on with Phillips. Short little guys.
They're really short. Only about a 1/4 inch, or 4 millimeters.
Goes off. This is how that panel looks like. Okay, so with that back panel off, we can take off the last Phillips here on this side. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna wanna tilt this back and forth gently, because they have this like silicone glue that kind of just keeps it weather tight. So I'll use this plastic pick tool to kind of help it get unglued a little bit from its spot. Okay. So we can leave this outer layer on here. We just want to take off this bottom piece here. So that's glued in too. That can just slide back.
That glue is just holding it.
There it goes. So you gotta be careful with this because it's super thin, and also these edges are kind of sharp, so you can cut yourself easily. But basically, once this is off, that's kind of the last portion that's holding the sunroof fabric on top of there that's glued in.
Yeah, you can see this old fabric right here. It's just wrapped around, and that's how the new material is going to be wrapped, the same way. So yeah, you can see it's starting to rip apart. So you're just going to have to get all that off. But same thing on this side. Yeah, you don't want to be just prying up like this, because you'll easily bend this and then it'll be useless.
That panel's out. You can tuck these cables back in here. That way they're kind of out of the way and not hanging inside the car. That'll be a little bit more easier than having that hanging to the side.
Yeah, this one's hanging, so we've reinstalled that one back in now that we've gotten that protective sleeve out of the way. Same procedure on the passenger side. Set this to the side. Tuck this guy back in.
sunroof can start getting peeled back.
Yeah, so you want to just start on peeling it from all angles. It doesn't matter that it's getting ripped because we're not going to be, reusing it. We're going to put all new fabric on. And once you get a good part of it off, then it starts to go a lot easier. But old material like this, it's not uncommon for it to start ripping just because it's so dried out, especially here in California. And you can see it's just, the sun has just killed it. But you definitely want to get all of it off. You don't want to put brand new material back onto old material because it's just not going to hold correctly.
Once you get that first initial, a half inch or inch or so glue off, it kind of just peels all away on its own. So it's kind of just getting the edges unglued, and then the rest of it goes pretty easy.
Yeah, and you always want to start with the sunroof as far as taking the headliner off. That's assuming you already have your glass out. As we spoke, or I've shown you in previous episodes, you definitely want to get the glass out first because it's held in by the glass. And then you want to start getting all the material off around the sunroof.
You also want to be gentle with this
foam. Yeah, the inner foam is for sound deadening, and it's also for heat. So you can't buy that. You want to reuse that as much as you can. See how it's not even holding really at this point. The factory here at the front, it doesn't really give you that much. It just gives you just a little bit. On our headliner material, we give you enough to actually wrap around to the front here. And I actually advise that just to it stretches enough to actually glue on here, and it's going to hold it a lot better. So the next thing you want to do is get all the door seals off here, especially here at the top and here where it goes to the C-pillar, because that is going to be holding your headliner in as well. As you can see here, it was wrapped around like this around the back window. We just kind of peeled it off. And so if you take the door seal off, it's going to be the same situation. Door seal off, and you can see the headliner is just coming apart. You can see a lot of debris here that fell through from the sunroof panel not sealing correctly. So here in the middle where your B-pillar is on the sedans, you're going to have a big plastic piece that runs all the way to the top. On the coupes, it's a B-pillar that just at the top, and a lot of times those are fragile and break, and so we now make a replacement piece for that. On the sedan, it's a little more durable because it's it's a lot bigger and it covers the whole portion of the door frame. As I said, on the coupe, you'd basically have to take the door panels off to be able to access to this piece and your seatbelt off, and then you're able to start working on your headliner. Next portion you want to do is you want to take the lights out, and you want to take the handles out, and the handles just have little covers on them. You want to pry those covers off, and behind those covers are two Phillips screws. The lights, a lot of times those are broken. They're not very expensive to replace. You can see this one's broken as well, so I'll be replacing that. On the inner side there is a frame. It's plastic as well. Sometimes those get broken. So those frames are fragile just from age, but they're also not very expensive. And this is a perfect opportunity to change that, because if you put your headliner in and stuff and then you have to replace the frame, it's a lot harder. Here's what the handle screws look like. Those covers just kind of go over that, snap in. If you take 4 of those screws out, 2 on each side, the handle comes right off. And that's it. And as I was telling you, here on the passenger side is a prime example. You can see that just from age, it's really just disintegrated. The frame is probably a good idea to replace it. It's really flimsy and it looks like it's going to break. So really not that expensive. You know, you're talking about 20 something dollars for the light, and probably the same for the frame. Unless you want the shaved look, you don't want the lights, then you could remove this altogether, tuck the wires in, and when you do the new headliner, don't even run them. And I've done that in a lot of cars, and it looks really nice and slick because you've got nothing there poking out of the headliner.
Once you're at the rear section of the headliner, there's 2 rods that clip in on the driver and passenger side, and they run through the inside of the headliner all the way across, and there's these 2 tabs right here that hold it in place. You can just gently pry these down just a little bit, just enough for you to slide this bar out, and then we can work on to the next bar behind it.
Yeah, so on a sunroof car, there's 2 at the rear. Non-sunroof cars will actually have a 3rd one at the front, somewhere along here. M3 is also different. M3 has a lot more rods than this. But the process is pretty much all the same. You can see that just kind of popped out. And then you've got one more rod here at the back. That one doesn't have those retaining clips.
And the rear rod is different than the front one. The rear one has a little spacer here that kind of goes into it.
Like a pivot.
And then you can just basically twist it forward to yourself with it still in there. And then once it rotates down, you can kind of take either one side or the other out. There you go. And that's the portion here.
You definitely want to retain those rods because you're going to be reusing them. But once you take that out, that's pretty much your headliner. It's out of the car. And there's the old headliner all pulled out. You can actually see some water damage was here. That's a water stain from when those ports are clogged. That's what happens over time. And also the sunroof seals, when they're bad, it'll leak in here. You can actually soak your interior like that. And it's been leaking on both sides. Okay, and this is the back side of it. You can see how the rods are laid out. Here's the first one. It snaps into the side of the car and runs across. Same thing on that side. And here's the back one with the pivot. And your new headliner is going to be exactly the same. The only difference is we give you extra material on the side. So in reality, your material is going to be about here. Same thing on that side. And same thing at the rear, same thing on the front. And during the installation video, I'll show you how to trim that out and get it all centered out. You're also going to want to, on your new material, make these little incisions here. So that way when you install the headliner, you're not going to have a big bulge there in those areas. But you'll be able to guide this either from your old material or just on the car where those clips are, the middle pivot clips that we bent out. And there it is. It's ready for the new headliner at this point. I mean, you might want to walk around and just make sure that, you know, all these areas are disinfected and cleaned, but we'll get into it in the installation video. Hope a lot of this makes sense to you guys. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this. And it's just, you know, this takes time to film and be able to explain every part of it. So hopefully you enjoy it. And hopefully it helps you with your project. Hopefully you enjoyed the first part of the headliner tutorial, and this really just focused on removing your headliner and getting things prepped. The car is ready to go to paint, so once it comes back from paint, I'll be able to show you guys how to install it back on the car, and then we'll go into more detail as far as prepping around the edges, taping stuff out, and making sure you're not getting glue all over the car and that sort of thing, what glue to use and all that. I have to say that this is just a guide and just a tutorial. There's probably many ways of doing this, so please don't blame us if something goes wrong. We're not responsible. This is your car, you're doing. But in that, hopefully you had fun, and hopefully it helps you. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you later.